This is the Note Closer Show, where you get the latest developments in distressed note investing and learn the secrets of how you can control millions of dollars worth of property for pennies on the dollar. Get educated and entertained by someone who has closed thousands of deals and lives to support you in achieving the same. Now, here's your host, CEO of We Close Notes, Scott Carson.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson. Excited and happy to be here with you today. It is a gorgeous day here in Austin, Texas, and as I've been looking through emails and answering questions and looking at some lists of deals that have come in, I've been kind of hit up by people who have got some lists of distressed notes or non-performing notes, but they don't know what they really have. And the stuff that they're sending me in a couple occasions, I'm like, it's not a deal. It doesn't make sense right now. And we see this happening with a lot of wholesalers. We see this happening with the different joker brokers. And we're going to see an influx of those two types of personalities in the note and real estate space. Obviously, wholesalers have always been a big deal. I have no problem with wholesalers. I have no problem with people trying to put something together. I get it, understand it. But you have to know what you're looking at and if it makes sense. Otherwise, you're just slapping spaghetti against the wall. And if I want to eat spaghetti, I'm going to cook it myself, which is what I'm cooking for dinner tonight. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is everybody's got to learn, first and foremost, of what they have, what they're looking at. And that's what this episode is all about, talking about when a note deal isn't a deal. When you get a list in, does it make sense or not make sense? And so that's what I want to talk about because I've had this experience happening over the last week a couple times. I had a guy send me a list of non-performing mezzanine and bridge loans. Now, if you don't know what a mezzanine loan is or a bridge loan is, it's basically a short-term financing instrument. Usually, a lot of hard money lenders are doing this. Mezzanine means it's a bridge loan, basically helping you go from where you're at, got maybe a property or a house that needs work. It's providing the financing on a first or second junior lien position to help you to bridge that gap till the property's done until you can get refinanced out into permanent 30-year, 15-year, 20-year, 40-year financing of whatever you want to do. And I got to list in these first lien mezzanine loans. Some great properties, some beautiful properties. $1 million asset in Fort Lauderdale, a $600,000 unit in Houston, a couple $100,000 units in San Antonio. And I'm looking through these. I'm like, hey, these are not bad based on, okay, I see what the underlying value. I see the underlying debt. I see the full payoff if they're in default or not in default. So that's what I wanted to take some time today because you're going to see lists. If you're in this space and you start reaching out to banks and asset managers, or say you're a note investor on your LinkedIn public profile, you're going to get hit with people asking, hey, do you want to buy my debt? Do you want to buy my notes? Here's what it comes down to. You should be seeing that already kicking in on the owner finance side of things. If you've been around longer than 6 months, you've probably already had people reach out to you. Hey, I owner finance my property. Would you buy the note? Or I'm financing the property. Would you buy the note for me at par at the closing table? I had a buddy of mine in Utah reach out to me a few months back. Said, hey, I'm doing these mezzanine loans at 12% interest. Will you buy them for me at the closing table? I'm like, no, I don't want to buy them at the closing table. He's like, why not? It's a 12% return on investment. I said, it is now. But what happens when that goes south? Now somebody's got to fork out money to get it fixed. They got to fork out the foreclosure process. And yes, I know the value of the property is quite a bit above where the loan is at, provided it hits that ARV, that after repair of value aspect of things. And what is after repair value? Well, if you buy a property and it needs work, it looks like crap, but it's worth as is 100, and you put 30 grand into it, and now it's worth 200. Great, that 200,000 is the after repair value. That 30,000 goes into it. But what has happened, and what will we see happen more? We'll see unfinished projects. We'll see people take draws to finance the repairs, but then they don't finance it. They use it on another property. They buy the supplies and go back and refund them. I only say that because that's happened to a number of people. It's happened a lot of people, and it happened to a ton of people and investors 10 years ago as contractors, as work started to dry up, as people started struggling to pay things. Contractors would get very aggressive and they think, oh, hey, I'll buy it. Well, no, they went and returned it and just put it on in cash or on their card. So you got to be careful about that. But what I'm trying to get at is when you see a list of deals, and that's what's going to come across the board. Let's first start with the mezzanine financing piece, the bridge loan aspect of things. The first thing that adds value is you want to make sure, one, you're in a first lien position. You're only buying first liens, not second liens, because that's going to be dangerous as the first liens start to default. So second lien investors out there may be getting excited because they're going to start seeing some more stuff at the market, but it's dangerous behind a first lien because if you're buying a second lien, to avoid getting wiped out, you would need to either start making the payments on the first lien or foreclose and hope that there's still a ton of equity above the first lien and above your amount that you're due in the legal balance. So always make sure you're buying a first lien. It means there's no other liens or loans out there in front of you besides taxes. Check the taxes and stuff like that. So checking that. Now, what is also important to see is looking to see who the borrower is on the assets. Like I looked at this one list that was sent to me and I immediately showed the borrower information. It was an LLC, not a person. And so I immediately started searching for assets on this one property. And I'm not going to tell you the name, but I found up there in they just filed bankruptcy in February. And so this deal is going to be drug out quite a bit in bankruptcy court. Now, Scott, some people was asking, well, Scott, you said BK is good in note business. It is. It can definitely be because you get reperforming or I can get the asset returned back to me, but I don't want to have to drag stuff out. Because right now, the longer this asset gets tied up when it's not being worked on, not the repairs being done, because I don't know the exact condition of the property yet, I'm still waiting to see things. I have to assume based on the numbers that we're showing, now most of these mezzanine financing will show you if there's been approved for financing or there's been a draw where maybe the borrower took out a 180 grand loan, 130 was for the finance of the property, and the other 50 was for repair draw. And seeing 20, 25 grand has been pulled off the draws, where'd that money go? Did it actually go into the repairs? So mezzanine financing, on the front end, I have to say this is a little bit different than buying a true first lien from a bank or an institution, is you should put eyes on the asset beforehand. I think it's important to do because the last thing you want to do is, oh, this picture looks great. And then suddenly see later on that, oh, no, property doesn't have a roof. Property doesn't have walls. Property is completely demolished compared to what the online photos look like. So that's an important thing when looking at bridge financing, mezzanine financing, is making sure the condition. You don't want to buy a note on a property and realize it's a shell of a house. There was a property in Dallas on this list I got. It's a fourplex. And I was like, ooh, a fourplex in a nice part of Dallas. Well, I got it and I did one search for the address and it popped up and showed that it was listed on realtor.com and it was a complete shell. So what you don't want to get into right now is getting into the fix and flip side in a downward spiraling market. I only say that because I've had some deals in the past bite me hard as I was working rehabs as stuff continued to fall, as foreclosures increased and days on markets went through the roof. All right. Now, that's not saying it's a finished property, somebody just can't sell it, the market's slowing down. That's a different story. If you find that the property's been rehabbed, completed, then that's a different story. You have a true solid value on that asset. Now you got to look at, okay, is the value way above what is owed on the asset? And that takes us really kind of the second half of evaluating the tape, is you need to know value, not after repair value, but as is value. If the repair has been done, then the ARV is the as is at this point. If the repairs have not been done, then the ARV would be higher than as is value. So knowing the true condition of the property, like we talked about a minute ago. But here's the thing. If the property has now been completed and maybe the loan was for 6 months or the loan was for 12 months, I got listed where the balloon came due on the mezzanine financing. Yes, you can have a balloon on a commercial note. If it's financed to an entity, you can have a balloon all day long. It's not to a residential or an owner occupant. It's a different story. So looking at, okay, has the borrower been making payments? Has a default rate kicked in? Has usury kicked in? That's an important thing. I was looking, most hard money, most mezzanine loans will be somewhere between 11 and 14% interest rate, sometimes 15, sometimes there are points charged. So looking at knowing what the true balance is, okay, have they been making payments or are they 6 months behind? Are they 12 months behind? Is it been without any payments whatsoever? Is the property vacant? Is somebody living in it? Is the rehabber moved into the property? All right. Other things that will pop up with that is, okay, what's really due? What's the default rate? And I saw on one asset, they said default rate went from 12 to 24%. I'm like, whoa, that's getting usury there pretty close. You may have a difficult time foreclosing on that asset because you've got usury kicking in and you can't be charging that high an interest rate. I don't really want to see default rates above 18, 21% on a default note like that. Yeah, I know credit cards will charge 24, 27 or whatever, but I don't think you should be that. I think you're going to get into problems with that as the market, as aggressive or predatory lending, even though it's with an NT investment property versus an owner occupant, primary residence. You still got to realize that you may not be able to foreclose and collect on all interest rates. That happened to me back over 10 years ago. We took out, and then I provided hard money financing with a friend of mine. We financed a second lien position on a big $400,000. It was an existing first that the investor was able to take over subject to. Started to complete the rehab, market hit the tank. It's drug out. We adjusted the interest rate and based on the clauses signed off on, and we had to remove and roll that rate back after 6 months of legal because the judge and want to say, well, you're charging usury on this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so that's the thing to keep in mind. Just because it says 24% doesn't mean you're going to get the 24% thing. So make sure you look at that. Realize, hey, if it says, says that the borrower has the right to do that, just because they may have the right to do it may not be what you want to do. You may want to look and say, okay, let's recalibrate this at 18% versus the 21 or 24. Just to be in this, look, if they're defaulted and they're more than 6 months, more than 90 days default, that interest you're probably not going to see. Okay. And that takes us to the kind of third phase. If there is value there and you look at what is owed on the asset, the full legal balance, as far as unpaid principal balance, any draws, any back payments have not been made, and then any other late fees, what does that balance equate to as a percentage of true as is value? Now, if there's a lot of equity there, let's say you're at let's just use the numbers. Most hard money lenders aren't going to lend above 70% of ARV, okay? Now, they may lend at 90% of purchase or 100% purchase price and 65% of repairs, whatever. You got to realize you're probably not going to be, especially if the property is completed, probably going to be somewhere around 70, 75% of as is value. Now, there's equity there. Now, are the lenders going to take a big haircut? They're going to get a buzz cut? Probably not, okay? I say that as I rub my buzz cut head. Maybe they will. Here's the thing that you got to keep in mind too. What's the foreclosure time frame? Have they started legal? Have they accepted any partial payments? Because if you accept partial payments from a borrower, it says that you are giving relief to that borrower and not intending to foreclose. So if you've taken payments, taken a partial payment, or even the lender has taken on a monthly payment, you've got to restart that statute of limitations or that time frame to foreclose. So I may be 6 months behind. You just took a payment. Well, guess what? You know what? You're going to have to wait and see if they fall behind, and wait till they hit that 90-day period again and start all over next month. I know. What you have to realize is these things are going to be showing in columns. If you get these lists in, don't fall in love with an asset because if it's looking so cute or looking so great because of the location. Man, I don't find anything in Houston. I finally found a beautiful property. It's okay to make some offers, but realize that what's the seller looking for? This is the thing that frustrates me the most. Is when I get these lists in and I go back to the guy that brought it to me, the broker, the Wall Street guy, whatever, who's brought the list to me, and I ask him, what's the pricing point? And they're like, they're not giving any color. What does color mean? Color does not mean green, blue, yellow, not the flavors of the rainbow, whatever it might be. Black or white doesn't mean skin color, doesn't mean your eye color. What color means is simply what's the discount? Can you give me any insight to what type of discount that the seller is looking to get rid of? Now, to understand that, let's talk about the days in default that you have to see take place quite a bit. All right. So days in default. Most lenders aren't going to start looking to really do anything until the borrower hits 90 days late. Now, they'll send out letters, they'll send out phone calls. They don't want to sink in that $2,000, $3,000, or $1,500, whatever, in retainer to attorney fee to start the legal process, unless they have on-site counsel or in-house counsel. So that's the thing important to look at. How far default is the borrower? Get in the list, look at when the last pay date, when they're defaulted from. I've seen lists that they were 7 days late and they're already starting to move the asset. And I'm like, whoa, you're not going to give me a big discount on this asset, especially if there's equity above the legal balance. You know, you're sitting at 60, 65. If you're just 90 days or less, that lender, whether it's a mezzanine, a private institution, or whatever, anything less than 90 days, they're not going to give you that big a discount. They're not going to give you that big a haircut. Like one I saw, it was like a year in default. I was like, oh, I offered 50 cents of unpaid balance, which equaled out to about 40% of value, because the guy told me, oh yeah, they'll probably take 10 to 15 cents on the dollar. I was like, I doubt that. We're not quite in 2008, 9, and 10 numbers yet, but I offered 50 cents on the dollar. And of course, it came back. They didn't accept it, which is no surprise. Test it out with one before I get too bogged down on looking at the other 20 to 40 assets. So that's the thing. If a seller is 30 days behind, that note has a 90 to 95 cent value. They've lost 5 to 10%. And you see this happening a lot. You'll see somebody mix a payment, then they'll make up double payments the next month. Okay, that's why they're not going to take too big a discount. It gets to 60 days behind. Okay, that's going to drop it down 10 to 15% discount. 15 to 20% from 80 to 85% cents on the dollars what it valued at. You get to 90 days, 3 months, 70, 75 cents on the dollar, unless there's a ton of equity, and they're going to squeeze that in there, trying to still get as close to the unpaid balance as possible. That's the thing to keep in mind. That's why we as note investors get excited, because if it's an encumbered asset where they owe more than the property's worth, then you start seeing the bigger discounts at the 90, 120, 150, 180 days in default and beyond. Provided that they've not made any payment, provided that they owe more in the property than what the asset is worth, and we're making a percentage of the value with it being upside down. All right. So those are important things to look at. You know, what's the days on market in an area? How long has it been listed for if it's finished? Do they owe more than what it's worth? In case they owe more than what it's worth, you're often going on the lesser of the number. Well, that means they owe more than that. Can we do a short sale? Or are they willing to walk? What is the situation with it? If it's in an entity, what's the situation with the other assets in the entity? Are they in bankruptcy? Does the borrower have other assets in that entity that maybe if you take the property back, you can file a deficiency judgment against the other assets for what you're not claiming back on that individual property? That's something to think about. So that's a little bit more than just, hey, I got a list, I got a deal. That's when a note is not a deal. All right, everybody? Very important to keep that in mind. Obviously, checking taxes. Another important thing is zoning, code enforcement. Have they gotten the proper permits from the city? Has the city come out and given a certificate of occupancy? That's another thing. These are things you're not going to see a lot of times on spreadsheet. Now, sometimes they will. Some great mezzanine bridge finance companies will have a column for all that. CO, certificate of occupancy, is often what the title of that column is, and they'll give you a date if it's been done or percentage of draws. The thing that I always concern about when I see that draw is halfway or only like 10 grand out of 50 drawn, it means it's usually not done. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of this stuff could be paint, carpet, appliances, fixtures. That's not the big thing. When I really get dislike, you start talking about bigger things, like they've added a room, or they knocked out a wall, or they still got sheetrock, still got air conditioning to put in there, still got a roof to put on. I think back to 2008. I was out in Phoenix, Arizona, and in the Camelback Mountain area outside of Phoenix. And I had an investor I was working with, and she was all excited because she had found this little nook on Camelback Mountain, 27 or 30 homes, all worth $500,000 to $750,000 that was in default. And what had happened is a builder had come in, gotten all these investors, 30 borrowers, to go out and get individual loans from the bank and individual mezzanine loans on the financing, and it built these homes up to about 80-90% complete. They were missing the ceramic tile or the Mexican adobe tile on top on all these houses. It was very famous out in Arizona, paint, carpet, and then fixtures. Most of the work was done. But when we started finding out what was owed, it was over $15 million owed, but it was in each individual asset. So the lender, First Magnus Mortgage at the time, man, it just pops in my brain. We flew in there, I jumped the fence, I was walking around the housing department in a suit, green suit I had, and taking down addresses, and she didn't want to jump the fence with me, but I said, let's go take a look. Let's pull up these addresses so we really know what the street names are. Well, lo and behold, 45 minutes later, as I'm walking out of one of the house with a notepad, the cops pull up with their lights blaring. Woo, woo. Now, what are you doing? And I just explained, pulled up my cards, and I'm just walking around here. I'm trying to find information. They're like, oh, you're a real estate investor. We want to dive into that. So I had a police escort around the neighborhood there for another 20 minutes. And I said, this is hilarious. I said, how about, can you do me? I said, was there a 4Runner out in the front? She goes, yeah, it was. We saw it leaving as we pulled in. I started laughing. I was like, okay. She got scared, thought I was gonna get arrested, and she left me high and dry, which is funny. I said, can you do me a favor? Can you go ahead and put the cuffs on me and we'll pull up to her house? Sure enough, they did. Pulled me up, but they let me. It was all good fun. That portfolio of $50 million in debt, when everything was said and done and calculated up, was in bankruptcy court, and it sold for $4 million to a private institution who bought it, finished the foreclosures, deed loans, and then sold the properties, held the properties for a little while and fixed them all up and sold. I mean, they picked it up for 33 cents on the dollar, less than that. They had a lot of flexibility to finish the property out because they had to bring in and evaluate each property and then turn around and list it basically, for 50 cents on the dollar what was originally owed, which was a little high at that point, but they still made a chunk of money. What am I trying to get at? Is you need to know more than what's on the spreadsheet is what I'd like to say. Knowing where that property is, knowing what the condition is, that requires you putting eyes on the property. It requires you maybe spend $50 to $100 to get a realtor to drive by the property. If you see that it's been listed, pick up the phone and call a realtor. Hey, I've seen you listed this property before. What's the situation? Is it a good property? Is it completed? Is it trashed? What's the real deal? Okay. And that's not just going to come from you not making a phone call. It's not going to come from you not doing a little bit deeper dive, checking the county taxes and seeing what's going on. And look, right now with the market being like it is, I can tell you values are not going to stay at where they're at. They're going to slowly start coming down, slowly dropping a little bit each day. We've already seen this happen as a variety of price reductions across the multiple listing service in every city, every state has dropped. As people have dropped their prices, so is dropping the values. And dropping the values continue to drop, not just with listings, but as people are giving up concessions or, hey, give me 90 cents on the dollar, we'll make it close. The thing that you have to worry about when you're going to see the most amount of price reduction, especially in a neighborhood where rehab is going on, is seeing if there's any other distressed properties on that property. Are there any other foreclosures, pending foreclosures, short sales? That can affect the value of your property. Now, some appraisers didn't want to use that years ago. You still got to keep that in mind with everything's at. Because if you're going to take this property back and it's okay, you're going to just do partial repairs, but a property down the street at your same price point, same pricing, did extreme repairs, did really up and above repairs, that's going to require you to pony up some more money at the table. All right. Now, a very common practice that I've seen this done, this may be something you look at if you're looking at stuff, I've seen the pick your own. Fixture, pick your paint color, pick your carpet, where people are taking these properties back and they're putting a package together. Here's the 1, 2, or 3 package, and here's the price of the property of A, B, or C. I've done this in South Florida before, where we sold properties before we had the paint, before we had the carpet, before we had all the fixtures in, because we priced it appropriately to make it a value to let somebody take that over. Now, you don't have to pass inspection as long as the toilets are in, as you don't need appliances in. You don't need a fridge in or washer dryer. As long as they can check the water that it's on in the sink and that's connected, check the electricity. There's some things you get away with. Obviously, you need the AC in and some stuff like that, and water heater, okay? But this is something you may have to take a look at. What you don't want to do is fall in love with something and say, I'm going to try to get the most amount of value. These days, I think us as real estate investors, especially note investors, you need to look at things and probably say, am I going to be okay if I come out at 90 cents on the dollar? Am I going to be okay if I come out at 85 cents on the dollar? Am I going to be okay if I come out at 80 cents on the dollar to net after I sell this thing? Closing cost commissions going to be 6 to 10%. Other expenses, if you got to get some concessions because you're in a competitive market. We're going to be in a buyer's market now than where we've been in a seller's market. That is changing. It's transitioning in front of our eyes right now as markets are changing across the country. Some states are still going to be a seller's market. I think you're going to see that in your major markets, California, where you got San Diego, LA, San Francisco. You may see a little bit of a dip, but not nearly. Everything where it's at, I think, is going to stay pretty much the same for the most part, just because of the demand in those areas. And you still have plenty of people that have money that are willing to spend on stuff. But where you're going to see the biggest amount of effect in price reductions, we talked about this in an earlier episode, is the outlying markets, the secondary markets, where there's not as much demand. Now, is there something that I think would do well? I think your affordable housing, I hate to say this sometimes, but I think you're going to see an increase in the inquiry for mobile homes. I think that's not a bad thing. I think your affordable housing, tiny houses. I think if somebody in areas just outside of major areas were to find some land and turn them into smaller houses, tiny houses, brought together small communities with one main community center, I think you would do well to rehash that, to rebuild something like that in an area. It's just a matter about being able to get zoning and if the city and everything is set up for that. But I think that's an opportunity in helping people for a variety of reasons. One, not only those that are facing downturn and facing difficulties, giving them an opportunity someplace to kind of get their feet in them. I thought that would be a great opportunity. And we've seen it actually happen here in Austin, Texas already, where community put together smaller houses, tiny houses for the homeless or the people that struggled, struggling financially, or they getting out of hospitals or getting back into the workforce. I think that model is ideal. I think what we're going to see too is some of the modular building kind of increase back up as people are looking for homes and the need to get homes built and rehabbed or put together faster on markets, or even the smaller, like the not self-storage, but the storage container building. We've seen that happen here in Texas, in Arizona. Our friend John Keith has done some of that too, Arizona, Montana. I think the need for affordable housing is going to increase dramatically as we see things happen, as people are laid off out of work. Does that mean we're going to see an increase in owner finance notes? Yes, I think that we'll see an increase in owner finance notes. You'll definitely see an increase in potential owner finance deals where it's a subject to deal or a wraparound mortgage deal, or as sometimes people call it an assignment, loan assumption, or you're going to see more of that obviously as stuff hits the fan, but you still got to know what you've got on your books. Still got to know what you're looking at. You still got to know the intricacies of looking at a type of debt. It's mezzanine or bridge financing. Hey, there's a lot of moving parts. All right. Same thing on the commercial side of the ball game. I had an apartment complex sent to me in Kansas City that I was looking at. And I was like, okay, I see this was sold 3 years ago. It's on a mezzanine financing on a loan that expired 12 months ago. What's the real situation? Do you not have rent rolls that you can provide? Because a mezzanine finance company should have a full loan file. It should have full collateral file on the financials of the property before anything happened, especially if they were to approve the loan on a mezzanine finance. What's the situation? Now, looking at this asset, it doesn't look like it's in the best of areas. Might be a little rougher Class C. They're trying to bring it to Class B, but maybe it's got a bad situation with crime or other issues in that neck of the woods, drugs. Waiting for that information to come back, because on commercial deals, you're not going to be able to pull the trigger and make a bid unless something is just completely vacant and completely done. And we're going to see our fair share of vacant properties. So I think if you stick around, you'll be able to cherry pick some decent properties, some strip malls. If you want to focus on the big box side of things, you can do that. As we talked about, of regentrifying, these big department stores that are going out of business. I would almost not be surprised if we start seeing and this is kind of funny. I was watching an episode of Upload on Netflix the other night, and they had I can't remember what the name of the big store was. Oh, Bloomingdale's was down to like a small Best Buy to go. All right. It was like a vending machine where it had specific things available. Otherwise, you had to order stuff online. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a conglomerate come in with some of these big, and they take one big box store, like one Dillard's, and turn that in where you've got Dillard's, Macy's, and a bunch of other things in there all in one spot. Or micro stores, like some of the other bigger brands or the brands been toying with over time. I think you'll see more of that in the malls. I mean, if you don't have the online presence in your commercial business, where you're, especially on the retail side, that's the kiss of death. You've got to really kind of develop that stuff. But anyway, I don't think you're going to be seeing a lot of those deals will be picked up by big conglomerates in bigger hedge funds, bigger REITs for the most part. You may see some smaller stuff, some smaller locations that handle that, but I think you're going to see a lot more for lease signs on retail than we've seen in a while. Even though some of the commercial places were starting to hurt. I mean, we looked at offices in here in Austin, there was still plenty of space available. The executive suites that we're at has had vacant space, and I guarantee they're going to have more vacant space over the next few weeks as well too, and the next oncoming months. So that's the thing. Take the time, look at it where you're at, look at your database. You know, if you can reach out to your database and find out, hey, what are the top 3 states they're investing in? What are the bigger markets they're looking for? You know, what's the price point they're looking for? So you can start kind of putting together your buyer's list. So when that menu comes out from the banks and hedge funds, you know, you can make your money in between as a wholesaler, as a deal generator, or as like people like to say, a deal architect, putting buyers with the sellers and making your piece in the middle. All right. Those that are effective in that, those are effective in marketing and using the tools like email, LinkedIn, meetup groups, video, and can talk about the deal. I mean, even putting a PowerPoint together on something what you're working on, that will have value well beyond what you will ever believe now and into the future as you start getting stuff in. So those are the things that you have to be looking for. Look, you know, check out if you've been investing in a market, maybe time to pull back in that market. I'll give you an example. Florida is something we've not been into in a couple of years just because it got overpriced. Yeah, I'm reaching out to my realtor down the neck of the woods and say, hey, are you ready to go shopping here in the next 6 months to 9 months as stuff start hitting the fan? I'll reach out to some of the funds I know that have huge portfolios of loans in the Southwest Florida market, which is a big desire. Obviously, Miami, Tampa are always going to be the most expensive markets, but Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Martin County, all up the Atlantic coast. Or if you go to the Gulf Coast side of things, basically from Marco Island's the most expensive real estate roughly in Florida at the very tip, or Key West. Well, Key West would be more expensive. Marco Island's right there. But coming up the Southwest Florida Gulf Coast side, all the way up to Tampa, Clearwater Beach, Bradenton, that neck of the woods, even maybe up to Weston at the armpit there side of things. So looking at your markets, looking at what's hot, looking at the price points on some of the stuff. What are they wanting? If they start wanting way too much, like I said, above that 75% of the as is value, it's not a deal. Move on. If it's less than 90 days in default, it's not a deal yet. Are they going to be around? If you waited 90 days and came back, or another 30 days or 60 days and came back, the people that are going to make a lot of money here in the next 12 months are those that buy it right. And buy right sometimes means know now, offering a low ball price to see where they're at, what that pain point is, what they want to let something go for, and then just waiting for another month, or waiting for another 2 months, or going back. Hey, I know you want this. My price at this point is still at this. So keep that in mind. Hey, you may make 40 offers and maybe only get 4 or 5 approved right now, but if you follow up in 30 or 60 days, you may get another 4, 5, 10 to 20% of your bids accepted by just doing the follow-up and knowing what's really going on in that asset. Don't be afraid if you get outbid, if you follow back up in 30 or 60 days and that asset falls back in your lap, because the seller overbid based on the market and the comps, and you know what's going on in the market. So just be honing your skills, be honing your craft, really diving into the spreadsheets you get before you make an offer is one of the most important things I can tell you. And yes, it's great to see stuff floating around. Don't get too excited. Don't get too over exuberant in your bidding process. Just wait, take it easy, You're going to see a lot of sellers waiting for loan level pricing. If you don't know what loan level pricing is, that's where basically they send a tape out of 40 and they want to, they want you to make 10 offers. You're not going to say, oh, I'll give you $1 million for these 10. No, it means they want you to literally bid it out on an asset by asset basis. Because I guarantee lenders and mezzanine financiers right now, hard money lenders are getting phone calls from their investors. Hey, I lent you 50 or 100 grand or 200 grand. It's time to start pulling that back. You're going to see programs that have gotten dropped off. I think I may have talked about this briefly, where we've seen the reserve requirements going up. A lot of hard money lenders weren't requiring reserves. And reserves, it means, hey, do you have 6 months of payments in a checking account somewhere that we can tap into? Do you have 12 months of reserves? I guarantee we're going to start seeing that across the board in just about every mezzanine. You're going to have 6, 12, 18 months of reserves sitting in an account that you can't touch. That's got to be sit there, or you've got to pay that up front to us. And we pay 6 months of payments up front. That was something we saw years ago. So keep that in mind. One of the things I think is a big aspect here is you're going to see assets that are in that 150 first time buyer range where the values drop below 100, where you can get bank financing, and you may see an increase in the contract for deeds reappearing like they did a decade ago. I think that's a little further out. That may be in the second wave once we kind of get through some of the stuff in the next 12 months, but I think we're going to see an increase in that as well. So talk with your people, talk with your servicers. If you've got a servicing company, talk with your asset managers, talk with the people there. Hey, anybody that's looking to sell, anybody that's looking to move stuff, thinking about moving stuff, would you put a feeler out? Might be one of the best things that you can do for your business by just staying connected, reaching out, and knowing exactly what you have and what you don't have. And then following up. One of the best things that we have done over the years is follow up with different bids, 30, 60, 90, 120 days out from when we made an original bid. So track your bids. If you have deals that didn't get approved 90 days ago, follow back up. Our friend, I won't name her, is working on a large portfolio, 200 performing notes. Well, if they're not performing now, the values for those have dropped. All right. And I advise you, listen, I know you're working on this. You might want to pull values, and you definitely want to double check servicing records to see dates paid. Because if you're buying a performing note, it needs to be still performing as is. Dropping off for 90 days, forbearance, I agree, I understand that, but there's no guarantee that borrower is going to be back on track come August, come July, come June. So do yourselves a favor, look at where it's going. If it says it's performing, make sure, hey, what's the situation with it? Did they pay on time? Do they have reserves? What's the situation with that borrower more so than anything else? So guys and gals, we are going to see a feast of deals here in the next 90 plus days. Just don't give up on it. Keep plotting, keep making phone calls. You can start making phone calls. You start doing email blasts. If you've not done that in the past, do yourself a favor now and start doing those activities. Start taking the action. Reaching out to the contacts at asset managers or funds or places that maybe you haven't spoken to in the last 6 months because they just didn't have anything. Reach out now. Reach out and touch someone, but just make sure you're 6 feet away from them. Oh, social distancing, gotta love it. 6 feet away. I had a friend of mine reach out to me that I had on the podcast beforehand. He made a lot of his money by buying gym equipment. He reached out when he saw that a gym was going out of business or closing his stores. He reached out to the bank that held the note on it and said, I'd like to reach out and tell you I'm interested in buying the workout equipment. I'll buy the equipment for you, 10, 20 cents a dollar. Because a lot of these banks don't know what to tell you to do. The last thing you want to do is have 20 ellipticals sitting in a room. Oftentimes, they let stuff go for pennies and dollars. So he made his money originally by buying gym equipment, turning around and selling it. He bought like 10 cents a dollar, turned around, sold it at 50, 60 cents on the dollar. Somebody else kept what he wanted, had a really nice gym at home, but made money that way. And so if you've got opportunities like that to come in and step up, buy the supplies, buy the furniture, buy things like that, you may be able to pick up a sweetheart of a sale, sweetheart of an investment that you can turn around and move relatively quickly. Because that's, guys, I mean, I think back there was a deal that came to me from the Bank of Georgia. Synovus Bank actually was the parent company. It was 55 buses, not like school buses, like the real nice, like band buses. All right. 55. There was a company out of Georgia that was one of the biggest leasers of these buses to bands like Nickelback. You remember the Madden Cruiser from John Madden on NFL Today. The big buses that show up with a black tin, the party, I don't say party buses, but I'm with the band buses. They were in default, and we were basically about an hour away from getting approved on a sale on this when the bank went with a little higher offer than we were willing to go with. But you'll see weird stuff like that. Boat loans will be a big thing as people aren't paying they're not paying their dock fees. They're not paying their dry storage fees, picking up boats, motorcycles, RVs. You may have some of that taking place. So think about some of the ways outside the box. I mean, RV, think about that. You want to repo an RV? Maybe not. Maybe you do. If you can get it cheap enough. If it's still paper. So think about that, everybody. I mean, that's the most important thing I could tell you. Look at what's going on in the market. There's going to be a lot of money made in the paper business besides just on the single family homes or commercial property. Know what you have, know if it's got a deal. And sometimes, hey, getting creative, thinking outside about the box will net you a deal that you will be chuckling about 10 years from now. So go out, take some action, everybody. Like I said, take some time, pay attention, do some due diligence, and we'll see you off the top.